I am a real-life archaeologist and Egyptologist. Yeah. I've been doing that for a while, so my parents think my degree was worth it. And so I'm here today with the BU Archaeology Department. We have a pavilion set out on the lawn. You can come visit us up there, but here we're going to do a reenactment of a Victorian mummy unrolling. Now, some of you may be aware, or some of you may not be aware, in the Victorian era, mummy wrappings and unrolling were considered a social event. So, in the U.S., these tended to happen in medical schools and libraries. In Europe, these were more of a party event. You would go to a party and you'd roll out your latest treasure. In this era, people were traveling to Europe. They were going on these grand tours and they wanted to bring back a souvenir. What better souvenir than, ta-da! So in Europe, these would be big parties. People would come out and they would unwrap it and they'd take the things that they found inside, like jewelry and amulets, and it was like, you get an amulet and you get an amulet. In the U.S., it was a little bit more academic as it went on. Tend to happen in medical schools and sort of a venue with people, lined up sort of like this. The interesting thing is, during the late 1800s, exportation of bodies from Egypt was illegal. So what did people do? They smuggled them out. They would take them in their big traveling trunks. They would hide them in various ways. But that's one of the reasons, too, we have a lot of mummy parts in museums here. Because if you couldn't bring the whole thing, at least you could bring a hand home or you could bring a head to show you went on this trip. So today we're going to be unwrapping the mummy in the Victorian style. I'll be telling you a little bit about the Egyptian beliefs in the afterlife and some of the things we'll find on our mummy. We do have a suspected person in mind that is our mummy, and we will investigate sort of the indications of that and a little bit about his story. Helping me today is Jade, and she can introduce herself.
I'm Jade Lewis. I'm a PhD candidate over at Boston University. I actually specialize in mid-19th century, so mummies are outside of my wheelhouse, but the set dressing is. Today I will be in the role of a medical surgeon. And lots of times, or most times I would say, if a mummy was being enrolled in the United States, you would have someone who was in the medical profession performing something more akin to an autopsy than just going at it. Forensic anthropology, or people who are anthropologists who cut up dead bodies or something like that, didn't come along until a little bit later. So I'm filling in for that role.
So for the ancient Egyptians, we think of them as a very death-focused society. We think mummies and we think tombs, but we have to remember that we see a very small portion of what they left behind. So in ancient Egypt, the whole society was focused along the Nile Valley, and that's where people lived. Interestingly, 90% of the people lived on 3% of the land, and that's the same 3% of the land people live on today. So when we look at the archaeological remains we have, it's mostly focused on tombs and temples which were found and built in the desert areas. They had places people couldn't live. So our focus on the ancient Egyptians from a modern perspective is that they were very death-focused, but that's not naturally true. Also, we get this idea that they were very focused on religion. And this is true to an extent. But we also, when excavating, tend to have the temples. And if you think about your own neighborhood, think about how many religious institutions are in with one neighborhood. Now, think about who visits them every day. Think about who only visits them on holidays. Think about who may not ever visit them, but will wear a charm to St. Anthony because they always lose stuff around their waist often. So people have different variety of levels that they interact with these religious institutions within their own communities, and the same was true of the ancient Egyptians. However, for the ancient Egyptians, the idea of magic, which they called Heka, was part of the everyday life. That was a natural force like the wind and the rain, and so with their idea of everyday life, this idea of Heka and magic was part of it, and that goes into their beliefs about death. The Egyptians believed that after So the Egyptians believed that you had a spirit, and it was a multi-part spirit. And after you died, your spirit would travel to the afterlife and have to go through a variety of different trials to get there. However, in order for once your spirit made it all the way to the afterlife, you needed to have something to sustain you. And so you needed to get offerings from your family or your friends here back in the living world. In order to do that, you needed a conduit. You needed a place that your spirit in the afterlife could come back and visit, and you could receive those offerings. That's why they built these tombs, and the tombs had both a public part you could go visit and a private part which would store the body. For the Egyptians, they wanted the body to be the place where your spirit could come back and get those offerings. So they developed this idea of mummification, which meant they would preserve the body in a way that mimicked real life to them. And they wanted to make sure the body remained whole and protected so your spirit could travel back from the afterlife and re-inhabit it, get these awesome offerings of incense and beer and bread that your family would leave, and then could go back to the afterworld, keep living its happy afterlife, and then come back on special festival days. So everything they do to put into the mummy is to protect it for the afterworld and to make sure it remains whole. They also would include different things, like they would have statues of the deceased, that if something happened in the mummy, you had a backup. That, okay, well, maybe I can't go over here, I can go to this statue over here. The funny thing is they are very optimistic, so they would make their statues nice, young, and sexy. So it's like, well, if I have to come back to Earth, I'm going to come back into the statue with six-pack abs. And we know from the mummy that there were not always six-pack abs going on. So we get these different levels of interpretation. We also see them doing this with their tomb paintings, which we don't have any, but there's one behind me. They would present themselves as young and youthful on one wall, but then they want to show their wealth and their power and their prestige. So on the other wall, they might show themselves as a young man. And having the two things didn't contradict each other, it just showed both facets of their life. So here you see our mummy's been unwrapped. Today we're investigating this mummy. It came to us through an excavation. We believe it to be the mummy of Prince Ka-Mweset. Royal mummies are a little bit more rare. And we usually see a higher level of adornment and preservation. So one of the things we can see immediately is that he has this one lovely weshik collar on him. And a weshik collar is made up of multiple beads. And they believe that the order of the beads represented sort of the balance of the universe and the natural order that is represented by all things. And they would use precious stones that they would import from all over, including Nubia to the south and across the Red Sea. Also, one of the things we don't always see once a mummy is removed from its context is often the Egyptians were buried with live flowers. So we often find these dried flowers on the mummy or within the mummy, and here you can see there's pieces of live flowers that were buried, tucked and adorned on the mummy. One of the interesting things is we have Prince Ka-Mweset. Come on down.
Yes, there's a lot of space.
Yep. You sit on the floor.
So
Back there.
Prince Ka-Mweset's tomb was found, and we believed we had found his mummy. We had bones, and we had this beautiful gold mask. However, upon further investigation, we discovered that instead of bones, we actually had the bones of a sacred cow stored, and not the bones of the prince. So the prince's mummy is still missing, although we have the canopic jars that stored his internal organs, and we have this lovely mask. We never had his mummy, so that's why we're hoping that this mummy that's come to us today might be him.
So where would you like to be identified?
I think we want the chest.
Along the chest.
Or the arms, whatever's easiest.
Okay. Start opening up the chest.
So, as you can see, there's 4 jars over here, and those represent the 4 sons of Horus. Now, the Egyptians were pretty smart people, and they wanted the body to be preserved intact. So what they did is they removed the 4 most corrosive organs from the body to keep the body from deteriorating. And those are, that's Kabasenoif, and he protected the intestines. That's Duamutef. He protected the stomach. I remember that one because it's a dog, and dogs eat anything. This is Seti. He is the human-headed god, and he protects the liver, which I'm sure some of you can understand why. And Hapi the baboon, who protected the lungs. So these were the most corrosive organs, and they would remove them and store them in these jars alongside the mummy, so that when you got to the afterlife, you could sort of put yourself back together like a Mr. Potato Head, which totally is my story now. So the Egyptians believed in magic. They believed in this Heka. They also believed to get to the afterlife, you had to travel through these trials and tribulations to get there. There was demons and spells you had to go through to get there, and you had to know special curse words to say, and you had to call out the names of certain demons, and you had to vanquish other people to get there. So one of the things they did was they buried themselves with a script called the Book of the Dead. Now, how many people in here have heard of the Book of the Dead? How many in here know that the actual translation for that book is the Book of Coming Forth by Day? Not as sexy, but that's how it actually translates. So the Book of the Dead is kind of a cheat code. It was written in hieroglyphs with beautiful paints, and it would give you all the codes and tricks to get past these demons. And one of the things it would tell you where on the body to lie certain amulets. And as you can see here, our mummy's being unwrapped, and it's revealing all sorts of amulets on the torso. The quality of these amulets seem to indicate a upper class noble burial, which for Prince Conquest seems appropriate. And we have a variety of different things. Here you can see some smaller scarab made out of carnelian, a precious stone. And here, along where the internal organs would have been removed, we have some larger lapis lazuli. These are precious stones that were considered important due to the color and the rarity in ancient Egypt. So within the Book of the Dead, it would tell you what magical amulets to wear, but it would also give you spells. There's over 120 spells in the Book of the Dead, and there's a little bit of choose your own adventure. You could pick which ones you wanted and arrange them in the way you chose. Some of these appeared in all, some didn't appear in any, but one of the most important spells was the weighing of the heart. So in order to get to the afterlife, you beat all these demons, you say all these secret words, and pass through the afterlife, and you get to this very last part where you face a scale. And on one side would be your heart. And your heart, we have a heart amulet right here, this thing above the heart. Looks sort of like this little swat thing. Your heart would be placed on the scale on one side, and on the other side would be a feather. So the feather represents the goddess Ma. Ma, as we see here in this amulet, was a winged goddess, and she had an ostrich feather on her head. And so the idea was she represented peace, tranquility in the Egyptian way. She represented, much like that necklace, the natural order of things. And the Egyptians had a very clear idea of the way things were supposed to be. And interestingly, the Egyptians lived by a moral code. So it wasn't about what you believed, it was about how you lived your life that got you into the afterworld. So the idea was you got to this scale, on one side they put the feather of truth, justice, in the Egyptian way, on the other side you put your heart, and you were going to be weighed against the good deeds you did in life. So what you did was you got up and you gave, it's called the negative confession, where you got up and said all the things you didn't do in life. And that's a little bit easier than saying all the good things you did. So you got up and you said, I didn't cheat anyone, I was loyal to my wife, I didn't say any curse words. And because the Egyptians believed in this power of magic, just saying it made it true. Some other notable ones was they said I didn't steal food from children. And I did not eat feces, which I don't know if that was a problem or not, but they wanted to be very clear going into the afterworld. They did not eat feces. So you would give this negative confession, and then they would weigh your heart. And a lot of people think your heart was supposed to be lighter than the feather. But interestingly, for the Egyptians, and as you see here, almost every noble mummy was buried with a large scarab, a heavy scarab, right on top of their heart. On the bottom is usually always the spell about weighing of the heart. Now, it used to be the belief was your heart was supposed to be lighter than the feather, but the belief now is changing, and a lot of people believe the idea was that your heart was supposed to be weighed down by the good deeds you did and heavier. And the thing is, the Egyptians are very literal. They believe very much in being straightforward, and the heart scarabs are made of, I mean, feel this. Is this heavy? You think that's heavier than a feather?
Than a feather?
Yeah. You'd weigh down your heart, and for extra assurance, you'd take a heavy scarab and put it on your heart to say, yeah, definitely heavier than a feather. If you didn't pass this test, they had a cute little demon dog, part hippo, part crocodile, part lion, named Amit, who, if you ever see a Book of the Dead, she's usually sitting next to the scales all happy like a dog at dinner table, waiting, and she'd gobble you up if you didn't pass. But luckily, because people had the negative confession, they said all these different things, they would pass on into the afterlife. Now, anybody know, scarab beetle, that's a very pretty term for this kind of animal. Does anybody else know what the other name for a scarab beetle might be? Dung beetle, yeah. And so, does anybody know why the Egyptians saw a dung beetle as one of the most sacred animals?
Because it pushes the piece of dung that's like supposed to represent the sun coming out every morning.
Yeah, so basically, a dung beetle lays its eggs into a ball of feces, poop, and rolls it around. And for the ancient Egyptians, they would literally see this animal create new life out of sort of the basest, lowest element that there could be. So they would watch as the eggs would hatch and the ball would break open and out would come new life. So it looked like there was this amazing cycle of birth and rebirth going on, much like the Egyptians wanted to happen to them. So that is why the dung beetle was so sacred to them and shows up in so much of their amulets. Now let's turn our attention back to our mummy itself. So the interesting thing about Prince Khâ-em-Ouaset was he is considered by many to be one of the first Egyptologists. And we say that a little tongue-in-cheek, but it's kind of true. Egyptian history went on for thousands and thousands of years. So some of the monuments from the very beginning of ancient Egypt were run down and broken. And so later Egyptians, like those in the New Kingdom, would come back and revitalize them. And he took special care to go back and revitalize these older monuments, help rebuild them, restore them, and he'd always put his name on them so he got credit for it. But that's how we know that this was something that was important to him. The interesting thing too is he was son of Ramses the Great, who was also, somebody said the greatest love affair in history is not Romeo and Juliet, it's Ramses the Great himself. He built many large monuments, he built statues to himself, and had many, 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 many children. But that also meant, because he had such a high opinion of himself, that all of his children were buried quite richly. And as you can see too, we still have many different amulets on here, but we also have some cool jewelry, such as this bracelet, finely made. And gold is rare in Egypt. It would come from Nubia to the south. And a number of different amulets throughout the torso. Now, the skin here is this sort of thicker, dark color. The reason for this is they preserved the body through a course of actions that took about 70 days, depending on the era they were doing it. And they used natron. And they would use natron, they would cover the body in it, but they'd also stuff the body with it, as you will see in a moment. So they would make the slit through which they removed the inner organs we talked about, but then they would fill on the inside with these small sacks of natron, full of salt, and it would help desiccate, dry out the body, and help preserve it. And they would have to import this from special places within Egypt that had salt that was strong enough to do this. Also, since they didn't want you to go to the afterlife incomplete, they would add an amulet to the little incision they made with these two fingers to hold it together. Just hold this little slit together, just so in the afterlife you go and nothing else falls out. And then they would cover it with a metal plate, just for an extra assurance. And so they really took the care that your body would be as whole as possible once it got to the afterworld. Now, I think we're about ready to move on to the head, and that's really where we're going to be able to test whether or not this is a royal mummy. Based on the amount of materials that was yielded, the level of sophistication, I would say yes. However, one of the greatest and best ways to tell is by the teeth. Teeth reflect our diet incredibly well. We can actually sometimes date where somebody was born and grew up and how they moved on teeth and wear and that sort of thing. I don't think I'm making that up. It's true. But for an ancient mummy, we can really tell what level of society, what level of food they ate based on the wear and tear on the teeth. So here we're revealing the face of our mummy.
2 amulets over the eyes.
We have 2 amulets covering the eyes. And these are the Eye of Horus, which are a particularly strong protective amulet that was meant to mimic Horus the hawk-headed god. He's the son of Osiris, the king of the underworld, who had hawking marks like a hawk that are mimicked within these smaller amulets. Excuse me, sir, I'm just going to borrow these. And you can see at the eyes here. So, as you can see, our mummy is smiling and greeting us, or screaming, depending on how you want to look at it. A lot of people think that this meant that they were buried in pain, or they were screaming when they died. It's just a natural part of the drying process. If you think about your skin drying out, you just go like this, you're already going to start exposing your teeth. So a mummy is the extreme version of that. So the jaw dropping down, exposing the mouth, isn't a sign of pain or damnation or any of that. It's just a natural part of the way the mummy dried. Now, what is your assessment of the condition of...
Looking at teeth surfaces, I don't see any caries or cavities that appear to have caused too much pain. And while worn, not too worn. The surfaces aren't flat, they still have...
Right, so it does sound like we are in the presence of a royal mummy. So I think based on everything we've seen today, we are most likely in the presence of the prince, which is good news for us. And, you know, the thing with mummies is we only have as many as we're going to have in the world. My hope is that many years in the future, in some modern technology-filled society, the idea of unwrapping a mummy to figure out its identity or what was inside will be obsolete, and they will use some sort of X-ray scan through the air, some sort of, you know, electromagnetic equipment that will be able to peer through the many layers and give us some sort of computerized readout of what is enwrapped in that. And that way we would prevent the destruction of having to go through the process of unwrapping the mummy to see what's inside. And as I said, it's a finite resource, and anytime we go through something that's destructive, we hope to find additional information. So that's all I have for presentation right now. We're going to continue unwrapping the mummy, and I'll take some questions. And then after that, and they don't have to be just about the mummy, they can be anything Egypt related, and if they don't know the answer, I'll make it up. As we unwrap, we're going to continue doing that, but at the end, you're welcome to come up, you're welcome to touch almost everything up here. We do have the shabti up here, which is an actual Egyptian object. They would use shabtis as part of their tomb equipment. You would put it in, it would have a spell on it that said, please come to work and come to life in the afterworld and do all the work I don't want to do, which would be really helpful when you're writing like a dissertation or in a room. Either one of those are still a struggle. So they would have those. So that's the one object I'd ask you to appreciate with your eyes, but everything else up here you're welcome to touch carefully, but investigate. So I'll take some questions. Yeah.
Where are you going to put the mummy after you finish unwrapping it?
He's going to go back to the BU Archaeology Department where he is an adjunct professor. Yeah.
Apparently, does every mummy look like a slab of beef jerky?
Yeah, pretty much. The earliest mummies actually are interesting. It took them a while to perfect it. So the history of mummification, I'll give it to you real quick, is early Egyptian history, they made pits in the ground, threw bodies in them. Later Egyptian history, they would dig them up and realize they were really naturally preserved. And so early mummies are just curled on their side like they're sleeping. They started to intentionally mummify to mimic this. What they would do is they'd wrap the bodies in linen, but they weren't using the salt. So what you'd end up is a linen body that was made to look like it was wearing clothing and that sort of thing, but just filled with bones.
Okay.
So then they said, oh, okay, this isn't working either. So then they came up with a more sophisticated version using sort of the salt and the natron, using different methods of wrapping and removal of the organs, and that's when we get our beef jerky friends. Yeah, upstairs.
Yeah, so I have a question about the Victorian unwrapping parties.
Yeah.
I had heard this and repeated it to my father, who immediately scoffed and said that didn't happen. and he challenged me to find any records of the actual parties that this occurred at. And I did have a little trouble, and I'm wondering, do we have, old invitations from, in multiple times?
There's actually a book that I checked out called Mummies in the 19th Century, and it goes all through the 19th century fascination with Egyptomania is what it's called, and these different parties. And I think there are some facsimiles of invitations in there. It was a fun book to check out when we started doing this project.
They would also do sort of almost carnival sideshows where they'd have a mummy, but they'd also have a background that would move and tell the story of the background, and that's really neat. And that was in the U.S. So.
How late do you find mummification as a practice?
I mean, it goes all the way into the early Christian era, and we get some really cool Roman mummies where instead of having like the traditional like King Tut-like mask on, they have actually a painted portrait of the person inside, and it's like an encaustic portrait that is then wrapped into the mummy. So it's actually interesting. In those cases, they're not doing the youthful forever face. They really show a picture of what the person most likely looked like, down to the fact that we have indications of surgery marks on the face and some, other types of medical disorders.
I was just going to say, they actually have those at the MFA.
Yep.
Yeah.
So.
Just checking, is this an actual human body or is it an elaborate?
It is an elaborate. I actually created this after watching lots of Baker videos on YouTube. It's a Halloween skeleton that's been. Oh, thank you for the applause. It's a Halloween skeleton that has been essentially shrink wrapped with plastic drop cloths. So and to do it outside because it made everything so like drop cloths, like for painting. Luckily, our neighbors weren't paying attention, or they just don't care because nobody called the police. What's going to happen without spray painting it in the middle of the night? Anyone else?
So since you said kind of giving the mummies to another country is illegal, how do we do we still do this today? And if we do, how do we do it without getting the Egyptian government pretty angry with that?
We don't. I mean, well, that's a two-part. Professionals don't export objects from their country of origin anymore. It used to be, and up until fairly recently, if you're a museum participant in an excavation, they would get to take portions of it back to the museum, which is how we have such great collections at the MFA, we have such great collections at the Met, and Brooklyn Museum. We have some of the best Egyptian artifacts outside of Egypt. This process stopped because there was a shift in the belief that objects are best when they remain in the context of where they came from. So you can really understand an object when you're looking at it or experiencing it on the site where it came from or close to it. So now objects tend to stay in the country of origin. However, there is, and we should acknowledge it, a very real and very dangerous illegal trade in artifacts. Anything that enters the country after 1974 needs to have a documented provenance of where it came from, when it was sold, when it left the ground, because the antiquities trade has such dire impact on the archaeological record. Not only does it remove the object from where it came from, we get people in small villages who know that these things are worth money, they can sell them to lots of people, and they go on and they just destroy the rest of the tomb. That can give us lots of information. Early Egyptologists, before this really unprofessional methodology took over, they would just rip the body apart and take the jewelry off and just leave bits and pieces of the early kings. One of the first kings of Egypt, we only have his arm because everything else got discarded. And Egyptian mummies were used as medicine. You'd grind them up and eat them. Some Egyptian mummies of animals were used as fertilizer.
Mummy brown is a pigment.
That was made out of mummy brown.
It would also be used to fire steam engines.
Because of the oils that were used. So, now we leave mummies intact, and we don't even unwrap them. But the illegal antiquities trade, too, is also a problem in places like Syria, where a lot of terrorist organizations will use them and sell objects on the black market. And so it's one of the reasons that archaeology has become a hot topic. And like I said, we only have as much of these things as we're ever going to have, which is really funny to think of it as a finite resource, but it's true.